So let me.
So I see that it's recording. I can see the icon over here too.
Okay, so we're recording. All right, welcome to the Awakening Sunday Morning podcast series. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a naturopath, Todd Nelson, and we're going to change things up a little bit as this podcast series is related to the awakening and ascension process, where we basically talk about mindfulness and the process of awakening. The spirit, mind, body connection, there are three aspects of our self, our higher self, and those are the spirit, the mind, the body. And making sure that all of those are in sync and harmonized and whole and working together as an integrated one is very important. So we're going to kind of switch things up a little bit and talk about the physical, aspect of awakening as it relates to taking care of our physical body. I'm going to read something from Hippocrates. Before you heal someone, you must ask him if he's willing to give up the things that make him sick. And so the healing process, it's a very important part of the healing process that you have an intention or an awareness that I recognize these things taking place, and I do invite guidance or help from someone to lead me towards, a better way of taking care of myself. So, Todd, I'm going to open it up to you. You made a beautiful statement about, and I'm going to let you say it because you said it the best, about, self-love and how that relates to the physical well-being of our human journey.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. I think as a naturopath, I've been seeing people for 38 years and I've seen tens of thousands of people, and it comes home to me every day when I'm talking to people about their well-being, in that, we can either look at self-care as I have to or I get to, and a lot of times we try to kind of flog ourselves into eating better or breathing better or thinking better or moving better or relating better, and rather than sort of operating from the spirit of how do I practice exceptional self-care for myself today in the spirit of self-love. And a lot of people, most of us have not grown up with parents who model that kind of behavior, and we're typically not socialized into that kind of behavior where, most of us don't wake up in the morning going, really, how can I practice exceptional self-care today for myself? And how do I esteem myself that much, love myself that much, to care for myself and to care for this vehicle that I ride around in, so that I can maximize my function within this vehicle for whatever it is that I need to be showing up for each day. And most of us get kind of slammed into having to do that based on getting sick or being traumatized or something, where we start developing a series of symptoms. And those symptoms are like, in naturopathic medicine, we look at it as the wisdom of symptoms, where symptoms are kind of talking to us and calling to us to sort of pay attention, to get mindful, to maybe inquire into what's really going on with our system, and maybe asking us to adjust some choices or habits that we're making that might complement our function more effectively. And, there's the old analogy where, if your house starts burning down and your fire alarm goes off, you don't hit it with a sledgehammer and go back to business as usual. I mean, that would be the really irresponsible, mindless thing to do. So instead, it's kind of like, where's the fire? What's the source of the fire? What caused the fire? You might have to initially put the fire out, but then you got to dig a little deeper as to why did that happen to begin with. And so the why did that happen? That's a really deep question, and you can look at it from many different angles and many different levels. And it may be as simple as you ate some really bad food and you got food poisoning, or you got a toxic exposure of some sort, or you had a very distinct, definable, recognizable stressor that affected you. But on the other hand, sometimes it's much more subtle than that. And you have to do a lot of digging and finding out what's going on. Is there an emotional component? Is there a trauma component? Is there some sort of spiritual component as far as the lesson goes? And these bodies are wired to give us feedback. And a lot of times we disrespect that, and we sort of bash our bodies for giving us symptoms and signs that are actually maybe intelligent and trying to talk to us, and we need to pay attention to them and get more mindful. So that's something I try to coach people about, is to say, how can you use your symptoms as sort of an invitation to pay more attention, get more mindful, and start doing more deeper inquiry. And deeper inquiry might be everything from doing a stool test to getting a psychic reading.
Well, that's really beautiful, because you begin to see how integrated the journey is, that when you start taking that, look at your physical beingness, okay, this vehicle that, like you said, is carrying around our divinity, and that vehicle starts speaking through symptoms. And as you begin to listen to that, those screams, hey, look at me or pay attention, that's such an integral part of the awakening or spiritual journey, is that that body, it's also why I think so many diets don't work. It was like what you said, we want to beat the fire alarm with a hammer and think that that's going to stop the fire. We want to do this 10-day diet or whatever it is. It's a 15-day cleanse, and think, oh, I've done what I need to do to take care of my body. But diets don't work because they don't become a way of life, a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you begin this journey of looking at your body, all of these things that can be wrong, what you're saying, now you've got to go in and do diagnostics. That journey is so integrated. I'm not even sure you can separate them out. That when you begin looking at the body and the diagnostics that the conditions that you find are so related also to such a deep journey of finding self through those diagnostics. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Am I stating that clearly?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that's really clear, because most people, it kind of works both ways, I think, Jacqueline. On the one hand, let's say somebody might start a journey of transformation because they get seriously ill and or chronically ill, and maybe they're living with pain and fatigue and brain fog. Like, let's say somebody with fibromyalgia, for example, and they have chronic pain and digestive problems and insomnia. and brain fog. Those are some of the hallmark symptoms of fibromyalgia. And if you look at most cases of fibromyalgia, they are traumatized women.
Oh,
If you look into their history, they have emotional or sexual or physical or all of the above abuse in their history. Either that or they've been extremely sick with some sort of serious infection and their immune system never quite resets. And so they develop this neuromuscular set of trigger points throughout their body that are these sore points in their neuromusculature. Well, I can't tell you how many fibromyalgic women I've seen over the years that, they may have, and the other interesting trait in most of these women, and I'm really generalizing, but there's even some studies on this where these women have been previously super women, right? They're kind of like raising 5 kids and they've got a, hair salon in their basement and they're taking care of their husband and they're taking care of everybody but themselves, right? And so then they have this crisis, and this crisis becomes, it ultimately goes under this diagnostic heading of fibromyalgia, right? So, like the
I think you
Chinese,
might be speaking to me here.
uh-oh.
So I'm taking a personal journey right now.
Yeah, I'll definitely want to hear more about that.
Oh
But,
my heavens.
because I've had so many women. I used to be a keynote speaker for a fibromyalgic and chronic fatigue syndrome support group down in Texas. And we would have about 250 or 300 people show up for talks. And, over the years, what I've noticed, and I'm just using this as one example, is so many of those women have eventually said, I'm so thankful that that happened to me. And I would say, well, why is that? And they would say, because it caused me to do a number of things. It caused me to, one, slow down. It caused me to also, I had to self-reflect and self-evaluate and realize that I had to ask for help. I had to start saying no. I had to start creating boundaries. I had to start imposing limits on myself in a healthy way. I had to set people up around me to know what I need because I wasn't speaking what I needed before. And therefore, they start having better relationships, or they have to get rid of some relationships that are toxic and not supportive. And until or unless they do that, they're not going to be as fully as well as they can be, meaning they can start changing their eating, which is super important. They can start doing some biochemical interventions and hormonal interventions that all may be beneficial and help them feel and function better enough to get to the road of transformation. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, so much that in the symptomatic world, I think we begin having the symptoms that we don't pay attention to. We handle the headaches or the fatigue or the stomach aches or the joint pain or the whatever it is. But then if we don't pay attention to that, that voice that's saying, hey, I need you to quit running 90 to nothing outside and doing all of this super human stuff that you're doing, whether it's superwoman or superman stuff. I need you to take your masks off, your costume off, and I really need you to come in here and spend some time with self. And so that crisis that happens, and it can happen not just physically, it can happen in just traumas, you know, your house catches on fire, you lose your job, your child dies. There's so many ways that crises happens. But today we're talking about physical crises. That's very you can't run away from a physical crisis. I mean, when the body says we're not doing anything else, you can't. You're now needing maybe even to call 911. It's gotten so bad. Or now I've got to come to you, Todd, and say, I've got a problem. Can you help sort through my mess? And, you know, I'll attribute that to what we call, you know, spiritually, the dark night of the soul. You know, that dark night of the soul, or getting through that valley of the shadow of death. Now I'm aware that I'm in terrible trouble. And so that journey, coming to someone like you know, either a naturopath being different from a medical doctor, being that you address something much more than the symptom. You're addressing the whole aspect of the being. Can we talk about that a little bit? You talked about uncovering all kinds of things, not just doing diagnostics, which is important. You know, if you've got a leaky gut, or you know, mitral valve prolapse, or your blood work is, you know, your iron is off, all of these things need to be addressed. However, you're addressing them not from just giving a drug that's just covering the symptom. Tell us that view, if you will, please.
Yeah, the paradigm that naturopathic medicine is founded in is truly holistic. So it's really about healing your life, not just healing your symptom.
Beautiful.
Or healing your chemistry, meaning it's all part of it. And
so does that mean you're a psychiatrist as well?
half the time. Yeah, I mean, you know, I have to do sort of life coaching, if you will, and maybe some psycho-spiritual coaching with people, as well as coaching them about food and supplements and detox and botanical medicine and homeopathy and some of the more physical-based interventions, because, you know, the context in which you do whatever you're doing is as important as what you're doing. And, you know, the old saying that the spirit of what, you know, the spirit in which you do something is as important as the action itself. And so you can either do it, you know, you can either be eating salads begrudgingly, or you could be eating salads gratefully. And, you know, which one is going to improve your digestion more? Well, the latter is going to, for sure.
You know, that talks to us about that attitude of gratitude. Or, you know, I could say, which is it, you know, is it the germ, or is it the emotional condition that's allowing the germ to have access to me? So what is that? Fear of disease leads to more disease. So you're treating the germ aspect, or the condition, the physical aspect. But what I hear you saying is that there's another layer of, when you say holistic.
Yeah, and holistic is really everything. You know, it's mental, emotional, spiritual, social, career, you know, relationships, your environment. It's really everything, and how all of those things interface with your unique constitutional nature. And so that's the terrain, is your genetic endowment, whatever you got in your family tree, and then how that's interfacing and how you're interfacing with it. You know, in other words, are you in the driver's seat of the vehicle or is the vehicle driving you is always the question. And so somebody may enter care with me where they need to feel and function better as soon as possible, right? They need relief. Same is true with a medical doctor. Medical doctors are primarily focused on relief or management, symptom management. But they're, unless they're more functional medicine based or something, they're never or hardly ever looking at cause. Okay. So we want to look at causes. Is it, so I have to filter for, is this chemical, structural, environmental, social, mental, emotional, spiritual? You know, there's so many different layers that we have to look in. And if there's a layer that I sense or see or perceive that needs intervention that's out of my wheelhouse of expertise, then I'll make a referral. Like if that person needs some real psychotherapy, I'll get them to the right person. If they need some sort of energy work along with the biochemical work that they're doing, that's so complementary, whether it's, you know, something like Reiki or acupuncture or other modalities. So it's really about what do you need? And that's a process of discovery. So there may be really well-known points of intervention depending on what you're dealing with to begin with, but then it's a process of discovery over time. And you might like really need relief from pain as quickly as you can get it so that you can even think straight enough to then go to another level of transformation, maybe emotionally, and spiritually, to even be able to be aware of those things and to be able to work through them. You know, when I was younger, I used to have the sort of idealistic view of you could meditate your way out of anything. And what I've realized is we are very much chemical and physical beings in this body, and we can't deny that. And the more we deny that, the darn thing starts screaming at us even that much more in the form of symptoms to get our attention and take care of it, almost like we would be taking care of our own child. And if we don't, it becomes an unruly child. And it starts having tantrums and screaming at us in different ways. And then we finally have to go, oh, you know, I either am laid out on the couch having to pay attention to my physicality, or I'm in the ER or something where I finally have to take this into account. But it's interesting, you know, eventually, like you can eat like a saint, but if you're not handling the issues with your spouse, or if you're not handling the issues with your boss, and if you're not coming to a deeper, higher sense of who you are and what you're here about, then you're not fully going to heal. You're going to hit ceilings.
Well, I think that's really, really good to recognize that I can be just very astute spiritually. And like you said, read the Bible all the time, meditate, and yet really not understand my physicality and not pay attention to this beautiful manifested form. And then flip side, I can be a, you know, exercise every day and drink my green drinks every day and be this amazing fanatic when it comes to my physical body. And yet we see individuals on both sides that if they're not, if those two, if there's not a bridge built between the physical and the spiritual, then we see deficiencies. That's not the wholeness of the being. And I know that I've done that, you know, in my life numerous times. I've gone back and forth. I am just now truly bridging and recognizing I am as much physical as I am spiritual. And so these opportunities that life gives us to be aware of who we are, and I'm so interested in the way you balance on a daily basis, and how aware you are of that connection. And so do you, when you know, someone comes to you in crises, are you um you know, how many, of course, I think by the fact that they're coming to a naturopath, they're already in a position where they're beginning to recognize that bridging. Is that correct?
Not
You
always. I mean, I would say for the most part, Jacqueline, that's true. Meaning maybe they've already been exposed to some aspect of natural healing, um, and they're wanting less of a chemicalized medical type of approach. But there's also people that are just desperate, that are hitting the wall in the medical field. And let's say somebody refers them to me, and they, once in a while, they come kind of kicking and screaming. They're not quite ready to realize that, oh, you know, you mean I have to actually change some habits here and change my life and make some new choices, and don't you just have an herb for that? You know, in other words, it's still a pill for an ill kind of mentality, rather than I really have to look at possibly changing my life here, rather than just I take an herb and I'll get over it. And I would say that's less and less the case. I think more people are conscious. You know, when I started in naturopathic medicine, it wasn't very well known. And now, you know, there's Dr. Oz and Andrew Weil and Deepak Chopra, and you know, it's very much infiltrating the culture as far as natural approaches go. And so a lot, you know, people are much more aware, and they bring in that awareness, which actually makes my job a lot easier. Um, and you know, most patients that I see, that I can't make the first question to them, so what does this illness mean to you in your life? You know what I mean?
what
That's
spiritual journey are you on that we
yeah,
can, yeah,
that's a quantum leap a lot of times for
right.
people are at. So I have to kind of meet them where they're at, and then just pull them up the rungs of the ladder, so to speak, on in a way that is honoring wherever they are, whatever their speed is, whatever their level of commitment is, and just hopefully helping them stay in the process long enough, because it's not a quick fix, especially if it's a chronic issue. And it is a life change. It is a life transformation of, oh, I have to go through a process of discovery here of, there ain't no perfect diet. I have to find what really works for me, and I have to refine that from time to time. You know, I'm still working on my diet. I'm 62 years old. I've been working on my diet for 45 years. And I still find levels of transformation that, as I transform and I grow and I'm at a different developmental cycle in my life, then I have to adjust my habits to, versus when I was 25 and I could get away with a hell of a lot more.
Well, you know, that's a really good point, because I think we have a tendency to think that the awakening is something that happens in an instant, and all of a sudden the world is perfect, my body is healed, and that's still that quick fix mentality. You know, it is a process, it is a journey, and I don't think that humans have truly comprehended that the journey unfolds within us, you know, as I am here now and evolving, you know, when I make one choice to better myself, that opens the door to, you know, the next choice, which leads to, hey, William, can you hear me? Are you there?
Here.
Okay. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, thanks. There were like 3 invitations floating around. I had to figure out
Yeah, and I tried to get you to help me, but I did it on my own, and I think I ended up with, like I was telling him, I'm on Worlds of Power, and I'm not sure how I did that. So I should have been over on Jacqueline Prince. But anyway, I'm gonna I'll bring you up to speed. We're talking about the spirit, mind, body connection, and how the journey of awakening is very much a physical journey as well as it is a spiritual journey, and how, you know, until we really bridge an awareness between those two states of being, that we're still not, you know, complete and whole. And Todd, we were just saying that it's such a journey of unfolding. You know, I'm better today than I was yesterday, and I'll be better tomorrow than I am today. And to be mindful of that journey is very important, to find the peace to take that journey, instead of looking at the condition or the crises, which is going to happen. It's part of the process of breaking down, you know, the material man who lives externally in his ego identification, to see that divine within. And that's not an easy journey. So anyone taking the journey has got to truly comprehend that it really is a journey. Would you have anything to say to that, William? We're just talking about the journey that it takes to unfold, you know, our well-being, not just spiritually, and be imbalanced in just doing the spiritual journey, but there's a tremendous physical journey as well.
Yeah, no, that being patient with yourself is a huge part of it, and that's something I've been struggling with. So that you, when you do hit some sort of speed bump, or you know, you do something silly that you regret, you don't go into a spiral. You remember where you are, and you can ground yourself and take a step forward instead of taking a few steps back and then going forward again. So I know that's something I've been struggling with, especially when I sometimes feel I can't speak openly about certain subjects. Obviously, we're going through an interesting set of experiences around us with people and interactions and all that kind of stuff. And that's one thing I've noticed.
And Todd, does that not really exacerbate the physical condition, everything that's going on around us right now? How do you see that affecting, you know, individuals physically?
Yeah, a couple things. You know, William, you said about hitting speed bumps, and from my vantage point, you know, I can get into a projected perfectionism about how I think it should be by now, or you know, just sort of a perfectionism about how it should be, rather than compassionately accepting how it is, and saying that the speed bump is part of the journey, and it is an excuse to practice self-compassion and practice self-love in a deeper way, and practice the fact that as human beings we really have blind spots, and that we forget stuff, and so however developed we are, I suppose until we're fully anchored in some state of enlightenment, whatever that is, within our own capacity of development, within our own personality and our own emotional developmental cycle, to me, that's just all part of the journey. That's just the next, that's just another thing to accommodate. And then to address what you're saying, what's bigger than what's big these days, and I have lots of patients, emailing and calling me and saying, I had a patient call me yesterday this is a woman who's a yoga teacher and a life coach, and she's quite brilliant. But, in her neighborhood, they were celebrating one of the kids' high school graduations, right? This was just a few days ago. And so suddenly there's helicopters over her house and tear gas coming into her backyard.
Oh my.
And so vibrationally, we feel what's going on in the world. We feel the injustices. We feel some of the insanity. We feel the ego running amok. We feel the real threats that can be happening. And for some people, it's like right in their backyard. And this is causing a massive amount of anxiety and depression and fear. And these are people that are, I would say, have been working on their self-development for many, many years, who are being very, very challenged at this time, to anchor and take deeper that which they really know. And, cycling back around to what we began our whole discussion about is deepening and elevating and finding their self-care even more within the atmosphere of what we find ourselves in right now in the state of this nation, for example. And so, again, we could look at that, it's so easy, isn't it, for us to go, oh, well, get into a reactive state, and that sort of dampens the light of who we are in ourselves, because we start cowering into the old habits and knee-jerks of our reactions, versus saying, wait a minute, I have to pause more. I have to meditate more. I need to journal more. I need to look at how do I crank my light internally more in the darkness.
William, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, definitely mute. Yeah, sorry. I was just
That's all right. So Todd, I think that's really, really good. Sorry to interrupt you though, about meditating more, learning how to be more mindful. I mean, that's really our journey right now, as like you said, it's right in our face. It's really sometimes hard to deny the external conditions, and yet it is an opportunity, a great opportunity, to really train. When you talk about the Navy SEAL or the Green Berets or the elite that go into training, I mean, they hit the hardest conditions to train in. And I think if we can comprehend that humanity is developed enough where the universe is saying, hey, I'm going to upgrade your training. I'm going to drop you out of the helicopter in the wilderness with a backpack, and you need to step it up. This is a time where we're being called to really step it up. And I find with myself that as I keep coming center because I've practiced my whole life to do this, and you'd think that we'd go, how easy is this to remain centered? And yet I just keep, and so I'll find my stomach get tight, my head starts aching, but I'm able to thread back. Well, why are you feeling this way? Because I'm holding that anxiety in my stomach. I'm thinking too much about the conditions. And so I want to get back though to you, Todd. I want to get back to the physicality. And I cannot believe that we talked about this. We're at 40 minutes already, and where time goes in these conversations, I don't know. So we've got about 15 more minutes. And I just want you to continue talking about this physical connection and how to pay attention to the body. You know, that's another way to access spirituality, is the body will talk the language of spirit if you will listen to it, and paying attention to what your body is saying.
Yeah, it's a temple. And like you said a few minutes ago, like when you feel tension in your gut, or you feel some anxiety and you take the time to backtrack and sort of take inventory of what's going on internally, because, you know, our bodies hold patterns and they have cellular memory. And, you know, for example, you know, recently I would sort of get a little too caught up into Facebook stories of what's going on, right? And I would, usually I meditate every morning and I journal and I try to sort of set the tone for the day and kind of, you know, take responsibility for my own peace, right? And with everything going on, you know, with the injustices in the country and whatnot, I would find myself like just almost mindlessly and habitually just jump on Facebook and start getting engaged. And after a while, you know, it took me a few days to step back and go, wow, you know, my breathing is much more shallow. I'm having tension more in my chest and in my lower back. And what does that mean? And around my neck, and my sleep was getting disrupted. And you know, you would think I would know better, right? But the reptilian brain gets very chemically hooked into crisis and panic and fear very easily. Our limbic system in our brain is wired to try and protect us. You know, if a bear's chasing you through the woods, it better kick in and you better run. And the same is true with just reading the news, for example. So our bodies are a fantastic biofeedback mechanism. You know, it's like using a biofeedback machine where you're actually measuring skin response and breathing rate and heart rate variability. And you're using that machine to monitor what's going on with the rhythms of your body and noticing, gosh, am I holding tension? And can I kind of breathe through that and consciously let that go? And maybe send a wave of relaxation through my body. And maybe, you know, like I need to take real time for that. I need to fast from some of the negative media for a while. And I need to even raise my game on eating more exceptionally. Like last month, I took 22 people through an online detox. I called it the isolation detoxification. And I taught it for free. And part of it was physically getting
Wow.
clean with our diets and supplements, but also fasting from media and picking
Wow.
and choosing what is we're going to detoxify from our minds,
Wow.
which ultimately impacts our body. So, you know, the good news is we can choose to do that every day. We can choose to tune in. We can choose to listen, and our bodies will tell us very reliably, you know, what's going on if we truly listen to it. Maybe it's just adjusting posture and breathing. Maybe it's adjusting our thinking. Maybe it's adjusting our chemistry. And so the good news is we can be in the driver's seat to kind of change our state. And when we do that, then our physicality gets much more in line with our ability to filter for whatever's coming through us spiritually from our deepest self. I really believe that. Meaning if you're eating junk food all day long and you're chronically inflamed, it's way less effective to have your tuning fork attuned to the channel of light and love and spirituality coming through you. I really believe that.
So, William, do you have any specific questions relating to the physical aspect that Todd is talking about?
As far as like the detox mechanisms, it seems like the first thing that we would work on is like diet and digestion, and then kind of move upwards from there. And is there a protocol that you follow, or is it kind of your own thing you've designed yourself?
Yeah, great question, William. I mean, there's many detoxes that I use with people, and many protocols. I like to try and personalize them, but like in a class basis, I'll just use a booklet and a kit with a medical food drink that supports liver and kidney detoxification and some probiotics. And then, of course, really clean organic foods and juices. And when you do that, it's kind of like fasting. You know, I don't know if you've ever fasted, but in fasting, you can get much clearer mentally, emotionally, and spiritually because you don't have the physical gunk, so to speak, clogging up your mechanisms of awareness. So that's one aspect. The other one is if you do have digestive problems or if you do have digestive issues, we have to think about like being able to be stress resilient and maintain positive mood is absolutely dependent on gut function because 90% of our serotonin, for example, is made in our gut, not in our head. And about 50% of our dopamine is made in our gut. And a large portion of GABA, which is the most relaxing chemical we've got, is made in our gut. And that's all very dependent on bacterial balance. So if we're dysbiotic and we have bacterial imbalance in our gut, we're going to be more prone to things like depression or anxiety or insomnia or just lessened stress resilience and stress copability. So our gut and our brain are intimately connected, you know, with our heart in the middle. So we've got these three brains and these three separate nervous systems. So part of my work is to help people biochemically get that aligned, you know, so that they're working in sync. And when they do, stress resilience and mood can be dramatically improved. It's kind of astounding. So what I call this is conscious effort and chemistry. The conscious effort is I'm meditating, I'm praying, I'm journaling, I'm trying to practice as exceptional self-care as I possibly can. I'm trying to be compassionate and loving and kind to myself. And I'm balancing my chemistry. And when you have both of those synergizing, the net result is way bigger than any one of those by themselves. So I just wanted to really put that out there.
You know, that whole conversation surrounding the gut brain connection and health, including spiritual mental health, I actually would like to get more in depth in that conversation. We've got about 5 more minutes. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 of this.
Sure.
But, you know, as we really choose to become more and more and more mindful, at least for me, it becomes more evident to me that my spiritual mind can be saying one thing, and yet I know this is going to sound strange, but my cellular bacterial mind has a very strong language as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it is I won't say it's the place, but it is a place that keeps me in my anxiety, fear mind. And so I have to really be careful that I'm separating out which mind is speaking. Does that make sense?
That's well said. Yeah, really well said.
I
Most
know
of
that.
I'm sorry, most of us don't know that the bulk of the DNA in our system is bacterial, by far, by far. And so we're basically these symbiotic beings that are interfacing with bacterial messages all the time. And those messages either augment function or detract from it. And so, we're learning more about this constantly, and being in harmony with that in the biomes of our environment. And you're right. I mean, if you have bad bacteria, they could be screaming one whole message in spite of your very best efforts to stay alert and stay awake. And that could be actually altering brain function in a way that doesn't allow you to be as clear and as functional as you want to be. So that is a deeper conversation. There's ways of measuring for this. There's ways of intervening and balancing it. And so we'll have to go onward with the conversation later.
Yeah. So believe it or not, we've got just a few minutes, and I just want to thank you, Todd, for taking the time out to talk with us about the physical aspect of our journey towards awakening, and how listening to the body is so important. And the crises part, if one comes into that physical crises, to really begin to understand that that's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's actually can be, if you will allow it and choose it to be, an opportunity towards transformation and transcendence. And individuals like you provide such assistance and guidance and help in getting us through our physicality. So guys, wow, thank you for listening. And we are definitely going to have Todd back on to talk a little more in depth about this gut health as it relates to brain health and heart coherence as well. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you next Sunday morning. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Oh, let's see.